Hello and welcome back to Bay Area Independent Filmmakers. I'm your host, Connie Jo Sechrist. My guest today is a woman that you want to get to know, an award-winning director, writer, producer, and she's a part of the Film Fatales, which is a network of women filmmakers who meet regularly to mentor each other, share resources, and collaborate on projects and build a supportive community in which to make their films. Please welcome Cameo Wood.
Hi.
Thank you for joining me.
Thank you. Wonderful to be here.
Thank you. Now, I read that you got into filmmaking by making scenes out of still photos.
Mm-hmm.
How did that creativity spark in you?
I really wanted to make movies, and I didn't have access to any equipment, but I did have a Polaroid camera and a tape recorder, like a little cassette recorder. So I would take photos and then narrate them, and via audio. And I would make people like listen on the headphones and show them the movies that I would make just through these still photos, which was, funny because I didn't know that that was a way to make films. Like, for example, like La Jetée was made by still photos and then this audio overlay. So, but yeah, so that's how I used to sort of tell stories, or even just making, I used to make dioramas, and I guess it was more like a play, but I would make the dioramas and take photos of them and then tell audio stories. And then later on in high school, I would do the same thing for just slide decks of words and images, and then record audio and then send those out to people like in VHS tapes.
That's cute. Yeah. That's awesome. And where are you originally from, and what made you move to the San Francisco Bay Area?
So I was born in Massachusetts, and I lived there for a bit of my life. And I think I was last living in Vermont, where I was going to Bennington College before I came to San Francisco in 2004, I think. Okay. And I came here to work in tech because I used to be in the voiceover IP field.
Oh, okay. Okay. And then what made you jump to the film market?
So in 2000 and I think 10, I sold my company to Google, and I decided that, it was a crazy time. But it was, I had always wanted to work in movies, but tech was just sort of just always pushing me. And that was a good point where I could just walk away and start something new.
Awesome. And what are some of your major influences in the film industry?
I think, older influences would be like, Chris Marker. I think La Jetée is one of my favorites, but definitely Luc Besson, his movie The Big Blue is one of my absolute favorites. And The Abyss by James Cameron is a gigantic, I love that movie.
Yeah.
I have a script right now that's like a deep sea, like sort of submarine kind of movie, and I'm just ripping him off left and right. It's great. Or like, Catherine Bigelow's Strange Days, like huge influence. So yeah, I mean, I think, sort of fairly accessible, sort of action science fiction films. Robert Zemeckis, I really like a lot. And, Back to the Future, I think, is just a perfectly composed movie, and that everyone likes it.
That's one of my favorite trilogies. I hope they never remake that. Don't remake that. I will come and burn you down. Because they're just remaking things these days, and it's just they don't make film like they did back then anymore, and
it's funny you say that.
It's tragic.
Tamlyn actually just on I think October the 2nd, she was in a live performance, an all-girl performance of Reservoir Dogs.
Oh wow!
And I was like, you know what? I wouldn't mind a remake of an all-girl version of like Reservoir Dogs. I think that could be.
I would have to see it. I would have to see it. I don't know. I haven't seen the new Ghostbuster movie yet with all the women. I heard it was funny.
I laughed.
You laughed?
I did. I actually didn't think it was going to be funny.
Oh.
I was just going to support it.
Yeah.
And then it was actually funny.
Okay.
So maybe my expectations were really low, and I don't know. But I thought it was fun.
Cool. Yeah. And we were talking about Tamlyn is the actress that's in her new film that we're going to talk about soon.
Yes.
Now tell me about your first short film. It was a documentary that you did in Mongolia about people that ride reindeers.
That's right.
Tell me about that. Like, where did that story come about that you wanted to do a documentary on these people?
So I had seen a photo of a woman sitting astride a reindeer, and it looked like something out of Lord of the Rings.
Yeah.
And so I found out a little bit more about these people. They're called the Duca people, and they are from a Tuvan heritage. And the Tuvans are the throat singers. If you like, do you know what I'm talking about? Like from
No,
Turkey?
not really. Okay.
So, so that's how we usually know the Tuvan people, or
Okay.
as throat singers. And there's now 3 groups because they have this diaspora, because they used to be nomadic, and we are now demanding that people have, you know, countries and passports and things. So there's one group that's stuck in Turkey, another group stuck in Russia, another group stuck in Mongolia, and they don't talk anymore. So anyway, so the Duca people, they herd and ride reindeer, and they have an animist relationship where they worship the spirit of the reindeer.
Okay.
And they have shamans. And anyway, so I learned a little bit about the Duca people and thought they were just incredibly interesting, and I wanted to go and see for myself.
Yeah.
And so, yeah, and then I decided just to do a little day in the life documentary, because a lot of the photos that we see, including the one that I saw, are very romanticized and have them in costumes that they don't normally wear.
Yeah.
And so, and their reality is quite different than this Western romanticized version. So I wanted to make a documentary to show, you know, what it's really like to live there and live their lives.
And how was the trip? How was the experience going there as a filmmaker and talking to these people and trying to explain to them, hey, I'm trying to do this documentary. Did you have an interpreter with you?
Yeah, so I did have an interpreter. Getting there was incredibly hard. It's one of the hardest journeys I've ever done, and I've been to Antarctica, so that's saying something.
Yeah.
So you basically have to go from here to Ulaanbaatar, which is the capital, and that takes about a day and a half of flight from America, and then it's another 5-hour flight up north, and then 3 days of van driving across rough terrain with no roads, fording rivers, literally building bridges.
So pretty much outback.
It is
kind of like you're hiking.
Oh yeah.
Wow.
No roads, no people, no cities or anything like
Yeah.
that. And then finally you get to an area that's so swampy that you can't get a vehicle in, and then from there you have to ride a horse or a reindeer to actually get to the village.
Did you actually ride a reindeer?
Oh yeah.
How was that?
Oh yeah, it was pretty awesome.
Yeah.
They're incredibly strong. That's actually how these people get from. They have 4 camps, seasonal camps, and the reindeer carry the bulk of their teepees and all of their gear. So.
Wow. So
Yeah.
pretty much they use the reindeers as horses like we would do
Yes.
in the West.
Exactly. And they do use horses during the summer, which is the only
Okay.
time when the horses can be ridden, because the rest of the time between October and May, there's snow on the ground, and it's negative 40 degrees or so,
Which is better for the reindeer.
which is better for the reindeer. And so and it hurts the horses to be
Yeah.
ridden in that kind of weather. So they basically just let the horses be wild all winter, and use the horses during the entire winter. Sorry, use the horse during the summer, and then they use the reindeer during the winter.
Wow, that's incredible. That's an incredible journey.
It was pretty crazy.
And you won a lot of awards for that film, and that was your first short film that you did.
That's right.
Great.
Yeah.
That's awesome.
So, and it premiered at the St. Louis Film Festival, and it
Yeah.
showed at a whole bunch of other ones and won some awards. And
And as far as I know, you direct, you write, you produce. Which aspect do you think that you excel at the most, and which one do you kind of like the most, or if you like all of them?
I think I'm good at producing because I have a lot of attention to detail. I don't love it though, but I think I'm pretty good at it. I think I absolutely love directing because you also need a great amount of attention to detail, and because I had made so many storyboards, I had made an animatic. I'd hired actors to come and do table reads to do the voices for my animatics, to practice timing. We storyboarded out all of the VFX, all of the camera moves, etc. So a lot of that stuff, at least for me, really aided me in the directing process, so that when we were filming the movie, I knew every camera move and what shots we could give up, and I could sort of replay the animatic in my head and sort of see like, all right, well, without that shot, can I still have coverage for the story? And because I had already done all the work and tried it so many different ways, it was incredibly easy for me to make these decisions about which setup or which shot were most important to give me the coverage for the movie, like in the moment. Like, you know, like I had 5 shots planned, and I only get 2.
Yeah.
So which ones do I want?
That's actually a very interesting way of going about it as a director. I think that's really smart to do, because most directors, you know, they just have their basic information, their shot list, and then they just go. I think that's a better way to go about it. You're more prepared.
I'm very, very prepared.
Yeah.
For sure. I mean, one of the things, so I have this crowdfunding campaign, and one of the rewards is to get like the production notebook. And I think that people don't understand that it really is, you know, extensive camera diagrams, lighting diagrams, you know, editing ideas, animatics. We have about 1,000 different animatic,
Wow. Yeah.
Storyboard screens and modifications, and rack focus, lens options, and yeah, it's pretty detailed, like how to make a movie. And you could definitely take sort of the animatic that we made and the movie that we made and see like shot for shot what we planned and what we got, and get a good idea of, you know, what decisions we made.
Yeah. And we're talking about your new movie, Real Artist. Now, where did Real Artist come from? Where did the idea spawn?
So in 2012, I was on my way somewhere in the airport, and I went to a bookstore and told the bookseller, who was a friend of mine, I need something short to read because they won't let me look at my phone while we're taking off. At that time, they wouldn't let me. So he gave me this book from MIT's Technology Review called TRSF, Technology Reviews Science Fiction. It's just full of short stories. And I was reading them, and one of them was by a guy named Ken Liu, and it was called Real Artists. And I thought it was amazing. It was about the future of filmmaking, but it was cerebral. It had artificial intelligence in it. And I have this background in artificial intelligence and neuroscience and film. So I felt like I already knew a lot of the background of the story technically, and I'm very interested in hard sci-fi. And so this was a story I felt that would be really interesting to do as a filmmaker. And I know that a lot of people like to do these meta stories about filmmakers talking about making films as a story.
Yeah.
But I felt like this one was interesting because it's more about, at least for me, about what it means to collaborate with artificial intelligence in the future. And this idea of human beings, when we are getting scared about artificial intelligence, one of the things that we're really worried about is losing our specialness as artists and not having control of our art and not being special because we tell stories that that we think, you know, we think that storytelling is something that makes us uniquely human.
Yeah.
And when we have this idea that an AI could do it just as well or better than us, I think that we go into a panic, and we don't want it to be true. So I really like that aspect of the story. It's not just a simple, you know, this is how we make a movie, but it's more about what if the movie doesn't need us?
Yeah, that's interesting. Now, do you think that that's possible in the future? Do you think that that's the way technology is gonna?
I mean, I think it's much more possible than I think many people are currently willing to admit.
Yeah.
I think that you know, we already have. So there's a new movie, Morgan. Its trailer was made by IBM's Watson. So so we already have trailers that are being made by AIs. There's a screenplay that was made. Yeah. There's a screenplay that was written by an AI and then acted by actual actors. And there's a trailer for it that's online. So we already have movies, screenplays, and trailers being entirely made by AI. There are songs that are being written by artificial intelligences. So I think that, and they're not fantastic, but we can sort of look at them and get this idea of, you know, where things are going. And recently, The Revenant, there was this study that was done using something similar to an Apple Watch, where while people were watching the movie, the watch was looking at their at their heart rate and their movement, with this idea that when you're bored with a movie, you're kind of fidgeting, you're waiting, or maybe you're even looking at your watch.
Yeah.
And when you're focused, you're still, and your heart rate slows down. Or maybe then it speeds up because you're just so riveted by the action on the screen. And when you tie in an entire audience's fidgeting, an entire audience's heart rate, and when they stay still because their attention is so focused, and you look at all those things with the action happening in the movie, you get a really good idea of what are the moments where people have, are giving the movie 100% of their attention and focus. And these are the moments that are successful in the movie. And then you can look at all those moments where the majority of the audience is bored and they're kind of checking their watches and fidgeting. Maybe those are parts where you can edit it and try to get the audience back. So we're already doing quantitative analysis of movies. So, and I think that's just going to lead into artificial intelligences helping us make movies better than even we can make them. I mean, it may be within the next 100 or 200 years, but it's not that far away.
Yeah. Wow, that's incredible to think about, all this technology and how it adapts to, not just, how we can make movies better, but how we can live our lives better and all that kind of stuff. That's incredible. That's cool. And then you're in the front of this and starting to produce movies that are like this. So
yeah,
great. And about the film, I know you filmed part of it digitally and part of it on a film camera.
Right. So the majority of the film was shot on 35 millimeter. We used a Panavision Millennium XL camera in Kodak film. And the film sort of has two parts. One is from the point of view of the AI, and then the other is from the point of view of our main character, Sophia. And whenever I was trying to represent Sophia's point of view, I shot on film. And whenever I wanted to represent the artificial intelligence's point of view, I shot on digital.
Interesting. Okay, I like that.
And so, for the most part, most people can't really tell the difference, but I know.
Yeah.
And also, I can't really put a film camera on a drone, and we use a lot of drone shots. So, but it was really funny because also just setting up the shots and having the actors do their performances on digital was a very different experience for, I think, everyone versus film.
Do you think it was faster for the digital setup than it was for the film setup? Because I remember you guys had this big crane thing to push the film camera around because film cameras are
really heavy. Yeah. And then for the digital, we just had a tiny little stand.
Yeah.
I think it isn't necessarily the speed. I think that there's a few things that change when you're on film versus digital. When actors are performing for film, I think that they have this idea that they only have a couple of takes, and that each take kind of matters a little bit more.
Yeah,
there's more pressure.
Is expensive.
And I think because there's also 5 people running the film camera actively, I think that there's just a little bit more pressure to make your mark. To have your performance be very rigorous. Whereas with film, we did the same thing 20 times because it didn't matter.
Yeah.
Because we could just keep going. And I think that, not that anyone's performances are lazy or anything, but I think that you can just be a little bit more spontaneous and off the cuff, and just trying new things and not necessarily, there's not the pressure to make every second count.
Yeah, as there is with a film camera versus a digital.
Yeah. So I think that was, and also there's only, the DP, and there isn't, this gigantic crew running this massive camera. And I think it's a different experience for the actor. So, and the reason why I shot on film was I went to this talk at Sundance with Colin Trevorrow, who made Jurassic World and is going to be doing the next Star Wars, and Chris Nolan and Rachel Morrison, who did Fruitvale Station. She was a DP. And they were talking about film versus digital. And Chris Nolan, was very much like, I only shoot on film, and I can tell the difference, etc. But Colin and Rachel didn't so much. And what they did say was that the way that they ran their sets and their prep was so different, and the feeling on set in terms of how they're using the camera to create art, the actual act of making the film for them was better on film, was better using celluloid versus digital. And that they just liked how the set ran and how people like sort of had an elevated sense of their craft if they were shooting on film, which I was going to shoot, on digital until I went to that talk. And I was like, you know what, like I'm working so hard on pre-production, this idea of sort of, raising everyone's game a little bit by shooting on film and using, this equipment that was really designed for like big blockbuster films, and to use like, and I feel like it actually did raise people's game. People came on set and they were so excited to be working with like all this great equipment. And I think that people really gave their all, more than they might have on just a DSLR set.
Let's show that trailer so you guys can all see what we're talking about.
A movie is an intricate emotion generation machine. Why do you want to make movies with us?
I never really felt like I had a choice. It's always been my dream to see my imagination on the big screen.
We offer our audiences a perfectly crafted experience.
Is this a test screening?
This is how we make our films.
What do you mean?
A great artist will do whatever it takes to create a great vision, even if it means watching movies in a dark room 365 days a year.
Well, that looks beautiful. I've seen the trailer already, but I hope you guys enjoyed that. It's going to be an awesome film. Now let's talk about your two lead actresses. How did you lock down those actresses? They're pretty top A-list actors.
Yeah.
How did you get them involved?
So when I first was writing the adaptation from the short story by Ken, in his short story, the lead was an older white male, and the young woman interviewing at this company was a young Asian female. And I was just thinking, part of the movie involves memory erasing drugs. And I had to change it to two women. And I told Ken about this early on, and he's like, well, why are you changing it to two women? Like, how does that serve the story? And I'm like, well, having an older man erase the mind of a young woman, it's a little creepy. And that wasn't really the story I wanted to tell. And so I did that. And so then I was looking for an older woman who could play a character that was incredibly smart, sophisticated, that could plausibly run a large animation studio, and wouldn't come off as an ice queen, and could really carry a empathetic character. And so Tamlyn was someone early that we had talked to. So there was a movie that showed here, I believe at CamFest. It used to be called the San Francisco Asian American Film Festival.
Okay.
And so he had a movie called Robot Stories, which was about the future of people interacting with robots in roles like babies or lovers. And Tamlyn was in that movie. And one of my early producers knew him and had seen Tamlyn and had suggested her. And I thought she'd be great for the part. And so Ken and myself, we wrote a letter to Tamlyn, sort of showing her the script and what her costumes would look like, because we knew our costumes were going to be coming from BCBG. So I sort of showed her the look that we were doing and where we were going to be filming it. And she immediately just said, yes, of course, I would love to work on this film. This is ideal. So, so that was amazing. She was the very first person to sign on, and she
Wow.
had no hesitation ever.
Yeah.
And she definitely, you know, she loves to act, and I wouldn't say act in anything, but I mean, she wants to support young filmmakers. That's one of her goals.
That's great. I love hearing those stories.
Yeah.
I love hearing that.
So she's
Yeah.
amazing. And then our other part of Sophia, it was actually much, much harder. I always wanted to have somebody who had a lot of melanin, who was a darker skinned person. And because there aren't that many people hiring young black women for roles, for speaking large part roles, that means that there just aren't that many to choose from. So once you've gotten one role, your chances of being cast again are really high.
Yeah.
And so I wanted somebody who had some film experience or television experience, and you know, was very comfortable on the set, and you know, was a sort of like a named actor. But there just aren't that many roles for these women, so there's only, you know, 50 or 60 women that were, you know, short enough to play the role. We wanted somebody the same height as Tamlyn and had experience. So anyway, so it was very
Awesome. What was your most memorable experience on set of The Real Artist? Like, what, I don't know, something funny happened, or?
let's see. I think let me just, I had an idea in my head of what I was going to talk about, but I think one of my favorite aspects of the film, I think, was I don't know if you were, so we had this hallway scene that was probably our most technical scene. It involved the dolly, and we had to push, and we had a slider, and so it was very technical, and we just had all the right light, and the actors were, you know, really in the zone, and people were very excited by just how great it looked and the production quality of it. I mean, we
Yeah.
had this complicated aspect, and it is in the trailer. It's the scene where we see Sophia walking down a hall and then going into the theater for the first time. And so we had to manufacture a theater by having a large rear projection screen inside of another room. So when we open those doors, that isn't actually the theater. It's a theater we made just for the
interesting.
scene.
Tricky.
And it's also like where we shot all of our poster and promotional images was there.
Yeah.
And so, and then we had to time these loops so that when she opens the door, there's a dragon that blows fire right next to her. And so we had to have all that timing.
Yeah.
And
Not a real dragon.
well,
like a
actually,
animated.
no,
A real dragon? No.
no, yeah. So
I'm like, how did you get a real dragon?
so, and we should, it might be worth talking about that too, like how we got the animated video. But anyways, so with that scene, as she's walking into that room, just getting all the timing right, and just really getting a lot of those little aspects right for such a technically difficult shot. I think people were incredibly excited, especially as I think we got it right on the third try. And it required, you know, the whole crew of 35 people, like really fine-tuning little bits here and there, and it just worked, and it looked beautiful. And then the actresses saw it, and they were utterly thrilled by how good-looking it was. So there was, I think that was probably one of my favorite scenes. And when they were testing the timing, Tamlyn and Tiffany started dancing and rapping as they were walking down the hall.
Oh, really?
And no one was expecting it. And because we're shooting on film, no one had the camera rolling.
Yeah.
So, so I do have like somebody shot like a phone video from sort of far away, but we all started just like dying in giggles, and yeah. So because they're just they're such consummate professionals that to have them goof off on the set was. I think it was like the only time, so it was kind of fun.
Now let's talk about a little bit about your location. Now you filmed at the Chabot Observatory. How did you lock that down? Was that your original like plan to film there?
So when we were first looking at a location, I really wanted something that had big vaulted glass ceilings and was in an area that looked like it was surrounded by forest. So I wanted it to seem secluded.
Yeah.
So our original location that we were looking for was Cal Academy, but Cal Academy is open 7 days a week. So we couldn't get a lot of
yeah.
daytime shots there, and we couldn't really control any of the scenes during sunlight, and I needed sunlight. So we realized that that wasn't going to be viable. So we're looking for other options. And because I needed also a theater, we were looking primarily at science museums, because I liked having this idea of it being sort of clean and spare and concrete and glass and steel, and still being surrounded by the woods. And so Chabot, I think, was the second location we looked at, and they're closed 2 days a week. So we would have daylight, and they also had an area where we could set up trailers and campers for people who wanted to stay, on set.
Yeah.
So they just had a better sort of setup for us, and they were incredibly flexible in hours and price as well. So they were really great to work with.
Cool. Yeah, I thought it was a great location for the film, because it has all the elements you kind of are portraying about the AI and stuff like that. So
Absolutely.
great. And then now most of your cast and your crew were women. Now I know you're a part of the Film Fatales here in the Bay Area. Now, was that planned, or did it just so happen to come to form like that?
Well, so I think, just starting out with changing my two actresses to be, non-white people and women instead of a man and a woman, I think sort of set a tone there. And then one of my very first producers was Alexa Fraser-Heron. So between the two of us, we knew that, it was always the idea that I would hire the key department heads and then let them hire whoever they wanted.
Yeah.
And so I never made any demands on anyone. But I think that what happened on set was, or as we were building our crew, was we certainly had this idea that, like, all things being equal, if we have two people, equally qualified, that, it would be kind of more fun to hire the woman or hire somebody who wasn't necessarily white. And only because also in general, the men always had other gigs that they were competing with, whereas the women might not always have as many gigs going on. But also women were coming to us and hearing about the show, and they wanted to work on a show with primarily women, and they became very excited. And also a lot of them don't have as many opportunities to work on film. And they had most of our crew had gone to film school and had worked on film in film school. So they were incredibly excited to work on film with other women. And also women tend to hire their friends.
Yeah.
So I think that was also happening. And we had definitely this culture where hiring another woman was totally okay. Whereas in other film sets, I wouldn't say it's as encouraged.
Now, do you think in general in film that there's a stigma against film, like women making film? Do you think that it's a little bit harder for us to get our foot in the door? And
I mean, I almost don't even have to have an opinion, because the statistics prove out that 22% of all crew are women, and of those, I think it's like 2% are people of color. Directors, it's 9% are women at this point. There are major studios that have 0 works about to happen that are made by female directors. There are shows on television where there's a policy of not hiring any women writers.
Wow.
Because they're not funny. So that was a recent studio head that was talking about that. So there's there's definitely this issue where it's always been permissible to not hire women for various reasons, and that is a part of Hollywood culture that's still sort of going on. And most, I'd say a great many of the directors that we've already talked about don't have that stigma and are working actively against it. And we now see changes, like, for example, Ava DuVernay has a new show called Queen Sugar. And she recently hired only female directors for her show.
Nice.
And people made comments of just like, well, that's not fair, that's discriminatory, how can you do that? And she said, well, if Game of Thrones can have 5 seasons without one female director, I think I can have one show with 1 season with no male directors. I think that's okay.
Yeah.
And it's kind of like, yeah, that's probably true.
That's awesome. Yeah, I think with societies like the Film Fatales, we're we're really trying to make a name of ourselves now as women filmmakers, and I think it's going to change. I think, you know, we're going to see some big changes in the next couple of years with that.
I mean,
so I'm all for it.
you know, just equal opportunity is pretty much my only goal.
Exactly. And it's not just, you know, female versus male. It's also color issue, race, color, you know, where you come from issue. I mean, it's across the board.
Absolutely. And
I think if you have the talent, you have the means, you have the drive, then you should be hired and you should be able to do what you love to do.
And I think that it's also really important to be making sure that we're showing diverse perspectives and that that people can, I mean, so we have had a Black president now for 8 years.
Yeah.
And I think, you know, it's made a big difference to people all around the world who can now look at one of the world's leaders as somebody who's not white and sort of now see themselves represented. But I think that especially for women in roles of competence and leadership, we don't have enough representatives of that in television and movies, of seeing, especially like women, or especially even more non-white women in roles of competency and leadership where they are playing a role where they are not second to a man. And it's actually incredibly rare. And there's these series of tests that started with the Bechdel test about you know, whether or not there are two women in a movie who are talking to each other about something other than a man. It turns out to not be very common.
Wow,
You never heard of this?
I haven't heard of it,
Okay.
but that's making me think now.
Yeah, and so now there's something called the racial Bechdel test, which is when two people who are not white are two non-white women are talking to one another and are named characters, and their conversation involves something other than their gender or their race. And then you just sort of like layer on all these like funny things. And there's this other thing called the sexy lamp test, which is, can you replace your female character with a sexy lamp and it doesn't change the story?
Yeah.
And it turns out, anyway, so there's these funny things that happen with these tests. And so, and not that all movies need to pass these tests, but I think it sort of illuminates, you know, some things that we can improve in our storytelling.
I agree. I totally agree with that. I'll have to look that up and research. Let's go back to the film. Where is the film now as far as the post-production, and what is your overall plan and vision for it?
So right now we're in post-production. We have almost all of the VFX done by our VFX animator, Anna Rotke, and our sound is done by James Lebrecht, and let's see. So now we are about to do coloring, and we've already started submitting to our film festival. So whatever cut we're sending out now is already being seen for consideration for January. So the next step will be premiering at a film festival and having the film have final color and sound and music. And then from there, hopefully getting on some TV, and then going VOD on Amazon, Hulu, Netflix, and iTunes. About
Great. And are you submitting to film festivals locally and also internationally?
Yes.
Okay.
So we have like a list of about 100 international film festivals.
Great. That's awesome.
Yeah.
I'm excited.
Yeah, me too.
And what's next for you? I don't, you know, because some filmmakers already have projects lined up that they want to do afterwards. What's next on the?
Yeah, I have a feature screenplay that we're looking to do, which is it's a deep sea, sort of like abyss-like setting, and it involves primarily women, and it's a post-apocalyptic action movie that involves women in a deep sea habitat.
Yeah. Ooh, I'm excited for that one.
Me too.
That's gonna be great. And where can people go to follow you, to follow your films, to help support your future films or Real Artists? Where can they go?
We have a website, realartists.film, and that's where you can learn about the film and see the trailer. And then for myself, I'm Cameo on Twitter or cameowood.com. And yeah, and that's where you can stay up to date on all the information.
Great. Well, I'm excited for Real Artists. I'm excited for your future projects as well.
Thank you.
I think you're a wonderful woman filmmaker in the Bay Area, and I'm so happy to have met you and worked with you.
Awesome.
Yeah, keep an eye out on this one and for her film Real Artist. And we'll hopefully see you again soon on the show.
Awesome. Thank you.
Great, thanks.